Hello, fellow fantasy sports fans. Welcome to MFSN, the Hub's Fantasy Baseball Draft Preview Show, Thursdays, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. I'm Dr. Dan Ratner, and I'm here as always with Casey Vlad to the Bone Scheinbold and Ross the Boss.
Hey, everybody, Ross the Boss here. It's baseball season. I can say that where March 18th is opening day in Tokyo, Japan. Dodgers are playing. Who are they playing? The Padres? No, the Dodgers are playing.
I thought it was the Padres. Is it not? Or is it the Mariners? Why are we now? Why are we playing on this?
I know the Dodgers are playing. That's all I know.
I'll look it up.
Look it up, Casey.
We're here to talk second base and shortstop. I think second base and shortstop are positions that have a lot of really good players. I think there's a lot to choose from, and I have a lot of opinions too. So I can't wait to get started.
Well, Ross, you always have a lot of opinions. It's one of the things we love about you.
The Dodgers are playing the Cubs, by the way.
Oh, it's the Cubs. I don't know why.
And I disagree about second base.
It's two Japanese guys going against each other. That's right.
I mean, shortstop is actually the first position that I looked at that I was like, finally a deep position. Yeah, but second base feels thin. Second base just feels thin to me.
It is.
I have a lot of questions about second base I want to ask you guys.
I mean, I'm not saying there aren't some good options because there really are, but let's dive in, guys. Sure. We always talk about who's in the top tier at second base. I mean, to me, this second base it's funny to me because like it's a tier of one. I mean, to me,
yeah, I have a tier of one, and I don't even know if it's tier one as
my
top tier. Like when I think of top tier players, I don't think the best at the position. I think they're elite fantasy baseball players. They just play that position.
Right.
So when we're talking about Jose Ramirez at third base, like we did last week, he's tier one, not only because he's the best third baseman, but he's also a first round pick in almost every league. And so,
there's definitely only one of those in the second. I mean, no matter what.
I don't even know if he's a first round pick. I assume you're talking about Mookie Betts, but he's a shortstop this year. Does he qualify?
He's not talking about Mookie Betts. He's talking about one of his favorite players in fantasy. I know exactly who Dr. Dan Ratner was talking about. I know exactly who. I can read his mind.
This is hilarious because I'm talking about Mookie Betts,
Oh,
which tells us that you're not reading my mind. No, Mookie Betts does qualify for second base, at least in Yahoo leagues.
Yeah.
Okay,
but
he's a shortstop. I want to ask you guys: are we counting him as a shortstop or second base? Tell me.
I counted him as a shortstop.
I counted him as a second baseman and shortstop, but I put him in the second base list because.
Okay, so we're only talking about this guy once. So where do you want to talk about him at?
I mean, there's not much to talk about. He's an elite guy. If he qualifies as second base, draft him as your second baseman.
On fantasy stats, I don't think he's an elite guy. I really don't. I think he falls in the same category as, let's say, Jose Altuve. I mean, it's like these guys are good players, but fantasy-wise, their numbers aren't great. They aren't like tier one quality to me. But if you guys can change my mind, go ahead. I'm not.
Listen,
I'm just giving you my own analysis.
Last year was certainly not a tier one performance for him.
Yes.
Well, it wasn't exactly, but some of that was because he only had 450 at bats. You extrapolate that out to his normal amount of at bats, and it's elite. I mean, he was almost a 30-30 guy with 100 RBIs and 100 runs in that pace.
I don't have him as high as you guys. I think he's a great player. Again, one of the best players at his position.
I mean, look, would I take him like above Bobby Witt Jr. when we get to shortstops? No, of course not. No. Yeah. But if he qualifies at second base, he's so much better than the other second baseman. It's absurd. Yeah. So that's why I brought him in as a second baseman.
Okay. That's fair.
But listen, if he doesn't qualify at second base, we'll talk about him in the shortstop tier about where he'd fit. So I have him at number one. But Casey, you were saying that you only have one guy at second base, and that's separate from Mookie Betts. So who is that?
Right, and I have him, and I don't have him. He's in a tier of his own. It's Ketel Marte. I mean,
that's what I thought Dane was talking about. It's all like here last season.
Yeah, I mean, 36 home runs, 93 runs scored, 95 RBIs, a 290 batting average. He was certainly elite last year. Yeah. Only 7 stolen bases is kind of like there are certain positions where you're hoping to get speed in addition to everything else. And I think the middle infield and the outfield, with the rare exception of a slugger like a Yordan Alvarez or an Aaron Judge, you're going to try to get that fifth category at that position and middle infield. So that's why I mean, he's more like tier 1.5. You know,
now I understand what you mean. It's like he's not the kind of player that should be tier 1,
but he's the best second baseman by far.
And I don't actually agree with that. That's interesting. I mean, I think he's good, but I have him ranked 4th. So
Really?
here, yes,
Oh
I know this is shocking to you, Ross, but the thing is, I got burned by Ketel Marte in the
Right.
past.
I
I
can tell
kept
you,
him, and
I can tell you're very torn by him, and it could be a trigger. Maybe
It's,
we'll bring his name up now instead of the guy from Swift from the Bears.
DeAndre Swift will always be the ultimate.
That's
trigger.
another trigger, but maybe Marte will be another
Upton.
trigger for Dr. Van Radden. We never know.
No,
Right?
wait, who were you nominating, Casey, as my other trigger?
Was it Justin Upton?
Oh, Justin Upton. That's pretty bad too. Yeah,
Ian Happ was one too.
I would say Ian Happ is one of your triggers.
Dan never liked him, so he's fine.
Yeah. All right. So the guy I have ranked above below Mookie
listening.
Betts. I listen. I'm not loving any of these options actually.
That's fine. Who is
But
it?
I decided to choose Ozzie Albies.
Now,
And
another
he's had
guy.
I mean, it's funny because people could easily say to me, well, isn't he the same as Kete? He's had a bad run at various points, right? This is one of those things where if you haven't been personally burned by a guy as much,
But he doesn't hit home runs. He doesn't do RBIs. What does he help you in fantasy? I don't understand why you think this guy's a good fantasy player. He's not.
Well, first of all,
draft.
He's still a young player, so we don't know exactly what he's going to do. He's in that Atlanta lineup.
28 this year, so he's not as young.
Thanks, Stacey. I was just going to say that, but I didn't want to.
27, 28 is when people take big leaps.
I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but keep going.
In 400 at bats, he had 10 homers and 8 RBIs. It's not great. It's not great.
It's not even good. It's not. It's below average.
I had him 5th.
I had him 7th.
All right, I just like his upside more. I mean,
you just like him because he plays on the Braves and he's one of these flashy guys. And
it's really about the upside. If I'm going to go for one of these guys, I might as well go for the upside. And Ketel Marte, even though he actually probably has the most upside based on last season, I've been burned too much by him. So
I'll tell you my upside guy.
All right, who?
He plays in a place where the ball flies out.
I know who you're talking about.
And it's Marcus Semien, and he is a complete stud. Casey will agree. And he can steal bases, he can hit home runs, he can get RBIs, he can score runs, he does everything you want. And he plays in a ballpark where the ball just flies out of there, and they score runs. Texas, in Texas, I have Texas winning their division.
And the thing is, Semien has been a dominant player until last year.
Was not good
until last year.
Last year, he was hurt. Again, I'm not putting. I'm just saying he was hurt last year.
I have Semien in my top 5, but he has some risk of fading.
He's my favorite second baseman this year.
I have him 5th.
Yeah. That's fun. And the way you win your fantasy league, and I said this in football, I say it in baseball, you've got to go against the grain sometimes. You can't go with the herd. You got to go against the herd. And at second base, Marcus Semien is my guy. I'm going against the herd with it. I think it's going to be a huge year.
Totally get it.
And I guess the person I'm sticking up there, kind of like you have your upside guys, I'm going with Luis Garcia in Washington.
Tell me why.
He's only 24. He feels like he's been up forever, but he came up when he was like 20 or 21. So and every year has gotten better. Every single year, his underlying metrics, his exit velocity, his barrel rate, everything with his hitting has gotten better. Last year was a 280 average, 18 home runs, 22 stolen bases. And that's, I mean, if he continues that trend, like he's a 2020 player who hits for a good average. It's not the greatest lineup. He's not a well-known name, so you can get him a little later in the draft. Like you're talking in roto leagues, he's somewhere around the 10th or 11th round. You can get him. And he puts up the numbers that Mookie Betts put up last year. He puts up the numbers that Jose Altuve, who's going to go 5 rounds earlier than him, is putting up. And so to me, like I know we'll talk about value bets later. To me, he's a value there, but he's also, to me, I have him number 3.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I have him as a value pick, but I don't have him in my top 10 because
I like Garcia, and we'll talk about shortstops, but I like his teammate CJ Abrams the same way. I think he's on.
There's a trigger for Dan.
Oh, actually, that is a little bit.
Oh, guys, this year's going to be we'll talk.
No. The reason he's a trigger is that I bought him. I bought in on him like right away in his first season, and he sucked, and then passed on him later, and of course he's become good. Albert Mariquin, good to see you here. Please do let us know if you have any questions. So I don't have Luis Garcia in my top 10, but I have him as a strong value pick.
I have him top 10. I have him actually 6.
Okay. So where do you guys have Jose Altuve?
Garcia, I think the guy's a stud.
So I do agree with Casey though that I actually would rather get the value of Luis Garcia than overpay for Jose Altuve.
Right.
And yet I have Jose Altuve ranked 3rd on my list in terms of actual performing.
So do I. And he's I'm
just not going to pay for it.
He's not playing second base this year, but he qualifies at second base. The Astros have announced he's going to be their left fielder because his defensive metrics were pretty bad the past few years.
That's interesting, Casey, because what that means is Jose Altuve is going to be an afterthought in the outfield from now on.
Right. But he's going to provide you second base, middle infield, and outfield eligibility by the beginning of April or middle of April. And that suddenly makes him more valuable, right? You can plug him, especially in daily leagues, you can plug him at those positions where you have players with games off.
All right. So now in my back, so I have Mookie Betts, Albies, Altuve, Marte, Semien. After that, I feel like there's some upside guys.
Yep.
And some kind of value picks that are rounding out my back end of my list. Who do you guys have in that back half of the top 10?
Well, we mentioned him last week at third base, but I have Jordan Westburg in there. I
have him at 6.
I think he's certainly going to be, if he stays healthy, the way he hits, I think it could be very beneficial for him. And if you're not concerned about power alone, I think Nico Horner actually qualifies as a batting average guy who's going to steal a bunch of bases, score a bunch of runs. He gets on base at a high clip, and he runs well. So he's somebody else I have in there that I think, you're not going to get more than 5 to 10 home runs max, but you get all the other, you get the run scores, you get the stolen bases, you get the batting average. And when you're looking at the 10th player or 8th player at that position, you're talking about somebody who you can get at the very end of the draft.
And something that I like, not because I'm a Reds fan, but maybe it helps, is I'm not going to say John McClane, the star of Die Hard. We're not going to say his name. We're saying Matt McClane.
Yippee-ki-yay.
We're saying Matt McClane, who's coming off a big injury. I saw him at the UCLA alumni game a couple weeks ago. He's ready to play. I actually asked him how his health was. He said he's 100%. He's ready to rock and roll this year. And I think I really feel the Reds are going to win the Central. They're my pick to win the Central this year. I think they have a lot of hitting. They have the right manager in there. We have Tito. We have Terry Francona is our manager this year, and we have a really strong lineup. I mean, the Reds are going to be a good team this year, and I think McClane's going to be a big part of it. So I think value pick wise, but also if you need a good second baseman, he makes my top 10. I don't know about you guys.
For me, McClane. Now this is interesting because he burned me last year.
He was hurt.
I drafted him high, and then he was hurt.
Injury. Yeah.
I still don't feel fully burned by him though because I have him in the keeper league, so I'm still invested in him. And I think if I had one guy to target, the 2 guys that I most want to target at second base are Jordan Westburg and Matt McClane.
Okay,
because they're young guys with huge upside who have shown they can do it already. And so I feel like you can get them at a very good value, and they could be explosive players. I have Westburg 6, McClane 7th. And then after that, there's a big drop-off. Nico Horner's 9 for me. I like him in there as a good value pick. The other guys I have rounding out my top 10, I like Colt Keith. I think he's coming around. I think he's a young, good player. He's got good upside. At that point, it's like, I'm going to take a chance on somebody. Now, maybe you get Luis Garcia in there. That's a great pick. But if you can't get him, Colt Keith is a great way to go. And rounding out, you guys are going to laugh at this, especially you, Casey, but I have Gleyber Torres as my 10th pick.
I have him as the biggest bust ever.
I do too.
Really? Oh, wow. I have bigger busts than him.
He's going to Detroit. He was a middling average guy whose power is the only thing that gave him fantasy relevance. And now he's going to one of the worst ballparks ever for right-handed power. Unless your name is Miguel Cabrera, you can't really hit home runs there.
Casey, when it comes to like young players, you're the expert. What's your thoughts on Jackson Holiday this year?
I think he's a great post-type sleeper.
Yeah.
I really do. I think you can get him. Like last year, you had to draft him as the 3rd or 4th best kind of second baseman just because of the hype that was going on, because he played so poorly and was demoted. I would certainly feel comfortable taking him as a high upside second baseman if I had somebody like Luis Garcia, Louis Renfigo in Anaheim as another one, or the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, who are not going to wow you with statistics, but they're safe, and it allows you to kind of see if Jackson Holliday is going to work it out. Jordan Westberg's going to play third base. Gunnar Henderson, obviously, at short, and they're hoping that Holliday can be their everyday second baseman. They might sit him against lefties so tough lefties from what I was seeing early on. But I mean, I love the guy. I think I think he's a smart pick. Another one I like is a former Red, Jonathan India, who went to Kansas City this offseason. Like, this is a former Rookie of the Year who proved he has power and speed. I don't think it was a joke. Did he live up to it after that? Not really, but also playing time was pretty inconsistent for him. I think going there, hitting the top of that lineup, which is a pretty good lineup now when you have Bobby Witt Jr. and Salvador Perez hitting behind you, and Vinny, what do you get? Tortellini? I don't know what you guys call him. I know what his name is. Yeah. But I think it's a good place for him to have maybe 15 to 20 home runs. It's Kansas City.
What about breakfast? I forget what it is.
I mean, Jonathan has great hair. I'll give you that. Just like you said, you hit it on the head. Basically, it's like he's not consistent. I mean, he'll go games where he doesn't get a hit for like 3 or 4 games in a row. Then he'll have like a big streak of hits. But I think the change of scenery for Jonathan India is key, and I see him being an all-star in Kansas City at second base. I really do.
So I have him at number 10 actually on my list.
Yeah, I like him. I like how I like where he's going, and I think Kansas City. I know they won the division last year, but I don't know if they'll win it this year. We'll see. I like Cleveland, but we'll see what happens. But I'm
curious to see is Andres Jimenez in Toronto. As Dan can tell you, like 2021, 2022 in Cleveland, he was an all-star type of player. The last couple seasons have been rough for him, and Toronto is betting on a rebound, and it's a good hitter's park. If he can, you can get him at the end of the draft, and maybe even he might not even be drafted in shallower leagues, 10 to 12 team leagues. He's somebody who has all the skills and isn't that old yet. He's only 26. And he still stole 30 bags last year, even on a down year. So he's another value player I like.
Not a bad value pick. I've seen him hit. I always feel like, he's meh.
No, he's not. I'm not saying he's going to win you a league.
No, I agree. I agree with you. But I also did want to say, I think Jackson Holliday, that's my number one sleeper. I mean,
he's not my number one sleeper, but when we talk about sleepers, I'll give you my number one sleeper.
It's just people move on so fast from that level of talent. Do you remember how excited people were about him just a year ago?
Yeah, Casey was like,
it's only been a year. It's only been a year. Mike Trout struggled in his first year.
I agree. I think the guy's going to have a good. I agree with you. I think it's going to have a good year. I don't know how good, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's obviously debatable whether he should be the number one sleeper, but because of the I just, especially if a guy hasn't burned me that badly, I'm like, well, listen, he had that kind of pedigree, especially with his father.
And the other thing you have to remember,
like, he's going to figure it out.
The other thing you have to remember, when you're at a position as shallow as second base, taking flyers doesn't hurt you as much.
You're just right. You're just looking for a huge upside
because Jackson Holliday could, crap the bed, but is he going to be that much worse than the number 7, 8, 9, or 10 second baseman you could have drafted?
Right. So I think better to get Jackson Holliday than somebody like I would say better than like
Brandon Lau,
who I have as value picks. They're good picks. But I'd rather have Jackson Holliday than them just because of the upside. All right, let's talk about any other sleepers, Ross, that you'd want to recommend.
I like he plays in the smallest market, I think, in the league. I'm wearing this shirt right now. He plays for the Athletics. I don't think they're being called the
Sacramento.
I don't know where they play.
They're calling that. I think they're just called the Athletics. I don't think they're branding it to Sacramento because of Vegas. So I think they've just been called the Athletics with no team and with no city involved. But Zach Geloff, I mean, I know he batted .211 last year. I know he only had 17 home runs, but he had 25 stolen bases. And I think he didn't even have 500 bats. I see him having 20 home runs, 30 RBI, 30 stolen bases, and he's going to get his average up. I mean, these players, I know batting .211 is not that flashy, but I think he's going to hit around 260, 250. And I just think for value pick wise and even sleeper pick wise, it's a good idea just because of the stolen bases.
No, I love that you're talking about it there, Ross, because nobody's talking about him. That's a great pick.
What do you guys think of Nolan Gorman? The guy didn't put up an average, but it felt like he was hitting home runs left and right the whole time for St. Louis.
I hate St. Louis.
And he's only a few years removed from being a top prospect.
Yeah,
St. Louis. St. Louis as a ballpark, or you just don't like?
I hate the team. I hate the.
I love the Cardinals.
I hate the Cardinals. I can't stand the Cardinals. I can't stand the Red Sox. It's hard for me to stomach having any of them on my teams.
You must have had a hard time when the Cardinals and Red Sox met in the World Series.
Yeah, it was sick to my stomach, and I didn't watch it. And but long story short, I mean, he's like you said, it's not a bad pick. He's not going to win you any leagues, but he's not going to lose you any leagues. You know, I remember Donovan. He had some weeks where he was like player of the week last year. I remember that.
I would say Nolan Gorman. He reminds me of one of my sleepers that I have at shortstop, Xavier Edwards. He does something in one category, so it's going to depend on your team.
Horrible fantasy player, horrible. Just like the guy from the Padres, horrible fantasy player. Can hit for average.
You're talking about Xander Bogaerts?
No,
no.
What's his name? Arez.
Oh, you're talking about Luis Arias. I have him as one of my busts because what value is he really going to bring? I mean,
it's just batting average. That's all he does.
But people think of him that way. That's a one category performer.
That's it.
And he just doesn't give you anything else.
Well, it's somebody you can pick up on waivers anytime you want.
All right, let's quickly talk about a couple of values we haven't talked about, and then a couple of busts, and then we'll move on to shortstop.
Shortstop, so we got to hurry.
Right, exactly. So give me one value pick and one bust. Casey.
My value pick, I'm going, let me go to my note here. I'm going Christian Campbell, the second baseman who's still a prospect, so he could qualify under prospects as well of Boston. I am hoping that Boston comes to their senses and makes Rafael Devers their DH, despite his immature response to Alex Bregman being a better third baseman than him, because this kid is legit. He's got all the tools to be a fantasy contributor right away, and Boston's a great ballpark for him to do it. He's only 22. He should just be the plan A. So I have him as a sleeper that you can probably get at the end of the draft because of the Bregman stuff, and sit him at the end of your bench. And when Boston comes to their senses, he's going to be, I think, legit. And my biggest bust, I said, was Gleyber Torres. This guy was considered having a decent year last year, and it was 257 with 15 home runs. And now he's going to one of the worst case scenario for his fantasy value, going to Detroit.
Yeah, I can see it. In fact, you've probably convinced me to move him out of my top 10. I'll plug in Jonathan India. So Ross, how about you? Values and busts.
Busts. I'm going to say, it hurts me to say it, but Xavier Bogaerts, who I thought was one of the best shortstops. Xander Bogaerts.
Xavier is going to be even worse.
Yeah, Xavier doesn't play well at all.
One of the big picks I had like 4 years ago, like this guy's the best, but now he's just, every year he gets worse. I wish I can say something nice about him. I just can't. They're paying him a lot of money in San Diego to play second base, but
he's one of my busts as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bust. One of the guys that a sleeper pick, I don't think he's going to play second to start the season. I think he's going to play third base. And this guy went to the same college as KC Vlad to the Bone Scheifeld, is Matt Shaw. I think Matt Shaw, I really feel this guy, again, he qualifies at second. They have him at second in a lot of leagues. I love this kid. And if he gets the at-bats, this guy can easily hit 30. I mean, this guy has power.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to mention one more bust, then we'll move on to shortstop. Bryce Terang, he stole 50 bases last year, but he just doesn't have the batting tools, I think, to get on base.
Yeah, and he hit 220 after the break.
He's going to end up getting benched. So I just think that people are going to draft him based on the stolen bases, and then he's going to get benched. Now, could I be wrong about that? Yes, this happens all the time. But I just don't think he's got the on-base percentage to do it. Okay, let's move to shortstops, guys. I did find this to be a much deeper position as I looked at it. So who's in your top tier? This was one where I was like, whoa, there's like a serious top tier here.
Yeah, I have 5.
I have 5 also, but but there is a big difference in that. Okay, you got 4. So that'll be interesting. Oh, I know who you left off. All right, we'll get to that in a second. Case, let's start with you. Who are your top 5?
I have Bobby Witt as number 1. I don't think anybody can debate that. I have Ellie De La Cruz as number 2.
Your bust from last year is now your number 2 shortstop. That's very interesting.
I have Gunnar Henderson as 3.
3, love it.
I have Francisco Lindor as 4, since it's a redraft and not a dynasty or keeper.
Here is where Ross says no to Trey Turner.
Yep.
And then I have Trey Turner at number 5.
Okay, so I have Gunnar Henderson and Ellie De La Cruz flipped 2 and 3, but only because I think Gunnar has a more balanced profile. But Ellie De La Cruz, he steals so many bases, he can just win you a league on that. So I'm very happy with either of them. That's a coin toss to me. I had Lindor 4. I do have Trey Turner 5th, and I do have him in that tier. But I know Ross is gonna. This is one of his triggers. Ross will turn it over to you.
He's that dangling
part. Just the guy's a year older, and the fans in Philadelphia were booing Trey Turner. I don't know if you guys remember this. They were so fed up with this, all the money he was making, and he was hitting 200 something. I mean, it was horrible. I mean, he was until like August, he was horrible. I mean, guys, I'm right. And he does not get the 1 tier because of he's not in the first tier anymore. He's done. So my number 1
do you still have him 5th?
6.
Okay.
6.
That's reasonable enough. That's reasonable enough.
My number 1 shortstop, as much as I want to say Ellie De La Cruz, I'm going to say Bobby Witt Jr. just because the guy's awesome. I mean, the guy's awesome. He really is. He does everything. And
a monster.
I mean, if you picked him first in the draft,
he would be my first pick in any kind of draft.
I think a lot of people would pick him. I agree with you.
Actually, that's not true. In an NL only draft, he wouldn't be my first pick.
I mean, Ohtani, I know is Triple Crown threat, but Bobby Witt Jr. I wouldn't say you're crazy picking him first. My second pick is Ellie De La Cruz. The speed factor, most exciting baseball player in Major League Baseball. You can't argue with me. He knows the most. Casey, you can't argue with me. You're not going to say it's Aaron Judge. He's not that exciting to watch. Ellie De La Cruz is fun to watch. This kid does a lot of crazy stuff I haven't seen in years. Gunnar Henderson, I love the name. I love the stats. I love the team he plays on. And Lindor, I mean, look at his stats. I mean, oh my God. I mean, and he's getting Juan Soto to hit behind him. Oh, I mean, he's going to have a better year this year than last year.
I believe so too. Yeah.
I mean,
I bet he'll end up having a similar year, but
better.
It just won't make a difference because
Lindor is just.
I don't know how much better it can be at age 31 season than 33 home runs, 107 runs scored, 91 RBIs, and 29 stolen bases.
Like, how much better is that going to get?
I mean, any 4 of those guys, if you have him as your shortstop.
The only thing that might go up are his runs scored a little bit because of who's hitting behind him.
Ross, you did just convince me. I'm adjusting to just 4 in the top tier. Trey Turner is in a tier below.
That's the dangling participle I always talk about.
I have Corey Seager ahead of Trey Turner, just so you know.
Oh, well, you've always loved Corey Seager. I love
Corey Seager too. He just doesn't.
He was hurt.
Run,
another guy got hurt.
He doesn't run and he gets hurt, but he still hits 30 homers in 2/3 of a season.
He's played only twice. He missed 39 games in 3 of the past seasons.
Yeah.
But at least 39 games. I'm sorry.
Yeah. All right, Daniel Ferreira has a question for us.
I know how many games he's missing. I get it.
So this is off of Shortstop, but he says, what is your value of Julio Rodriguez in a dynasty league? So, is the bloom that far off the rose for this? Where do you have Julio Rodriguez ranked in a dynasty league? If you had to start over now, where would you take him?
Well, Casey, how old is he? 24, 23? I mean, he's a young guy.
He's very young and extremely talented.
I mean,
I have him as a top 5 outfielder still in dynasty leagues.
Top 5 dynasty league, yes.
But Casey said outfielder. Ross, are you saying top 5 overall?
No, top 5 outfielder.
Outfielder.
I don't think he's top 5. I think he's. If you wanted me to make a wager on who could have a Ronald Acuna type of outburst, the way Acuna went from, he's really good, but is he going to be that great? And then all of a sudden he put up magical numbers.
Yeah, he'd be the guy.
Rodriguez is the one I bet on. I mean, because we talk about him having a bad year last year, and it was bad. But his OPS was 123 points higher in the second half. Like, he figured it out. He's just got to start well. I think that's what I think that's where he gets in the most trouble, is because he starts slowly. It's that kind of Victor Martinez syndrome.
Yep. All right, we got another question coming in. Diego Garcia says, who is your top mid-draft players for second base in Roto? So we just did our second base preview. We'll back up for a second. I would say mid-draft, I'm looking for Jordan Westburg and Matt McClain. That's what I talked about. Now, does that qualify as mid-draft? Are people going to be taking them too early? I don't think so.
I think Garcia
after the 10th round is when I would consider, I think, mid-draft.
Yeah. So I think you'll be able to get Matt McClain because he's coming back from
and
injury.
I think I'm looking at Luis Garcia.
I agree with Casey. I like Luis Garcia a lot. I feel that he'll have like a really strong, at least 2020 year.
Okay. I think those are all strong recommendations. All right, back to shortstop in the second half. So I do have Corey Seager 6th, but he hits 30 homers in 3/4 of a season or however long he plays. 7th, I have Matt McClain. He qualifies at both. I think you can take him. I try not to double up. I represent him as a second baseman because second base is so weak. My question to you guys is, how do you rank Willy Adames? What a season he had last year.
Moving to San Francisco.
Yeah, I have him. I have him as my biggest bust.
I actually have him as my number 1 bust.
Yeah, I have him as the biggest. He's my Gleyber Torres of the position because he's going to San Francisco.
I don't think he's that big of a bust.
His power won't play. It just won't.
It won't play.
Name a right-handed hitter in Petco Park in the last 25 years who's been reliable.
Barry Bonds wasn't
right-handed.
Wasn't right-handed.
Jeff Kent might have been the last one.
Jeff Kent. Remember his nickname? Poison.
No, I remember.
His nickname was Poison.
Yeah,
everybody hated him.
Jeff Kent. I'm not a Giants fan. I'm just trying to think of some power guys that were right-handed.
We talk about Matt Chapman being like maybe a top 10 third baseman.
It's
270 with 20 home runs or 25 home runs.
I just always love. I know how we each work. And Casey, when he's got somebody whose age is creeping up or is in a ballpark he doesn't like, he's just like he's terrible.
Oh my gosh! Well, right-handed. There hasn't been a fantasy relevant right-handed bat.
I don't think Willy Adames is going to be a bad fantasy player. I just think he's going to be a bust for where
I want to draft him. I know you guys. I want to draft him as my starting shortstop. But there's 10 other players I'd rather have than Willy. So there you go.
Okay, Ross. Who are the 10? Who have we missed so far?
CJ Abrams, I love. I think he's going to have a huge year this year. He's somebody that I would go against the grain with. I would take as my starting shortstop if I could get somebody else at a different position. That's great. Just depends where I'm drafting, who's taken, everything else. But I think C.J. Abrams will help you win your league. I think he's going to be a good player this year. He is. He's going to be he could be like a 20-30 guy. I mean, he's going to have a lot of opportunities in that lineup. Their lineup, the Nationals are a good team.
He was a 20-30 guy last year.
Yeah, I mean, the Nationals are a really good team. I mean, I have them winning over 78 games. I mean, I think that's the over/under on it, and I think they'll be at least a 500 team.
The guy.
I also like O'Neal Cruz. I think.
Yeah, that's who I was going to say.
O'Neal gets hurt. He's a big dude. He's 6'5", 6'6". He's a big guy. He has power. He has speed. I know he plays in Pittsburgh. I know no one wants to watch the Pirates games. I know they're horrible, except they have a few good. They have his pitcher. I never heard of him. That's could win the Cy Young.
That you never stop talking about.
You couldn't say his name right. It doesn't matter.
Paul Skees, but he is.
There it is again.
But something I want to ask you guys about, because I was like on the fence with this guy. Should I draft him? Should I not? Should I just lay off? And he was hurt last year, but the year before he was really good. Is Bo Bichette. What do you do with Bo Bichette in Toronto, where it's easy to hit home run? It's a good place to hit home runs now. They brought the fences in a little more.
I have him as a value. I have him as a value pick, and I think he'll end up on a lot of my teams this year because the upside is just massive, and you just don't have to pay that much. So draft him late.
Casey, I want to hear what Casey has to say. I know Casey.
I don't have him in my top 10. That's for sure.
I don't have him in my top 10, but I have him as a value pick.
I would say
you can't have a guy who hit 5 homers with a 220 average in your top.
But I mean, the year before he had over 200 hits or something.
I totally agree with you, Ross. But to me, this allows you to get him for cheaper, which is great. And hopefully he rebounds. Sure. We do have another question coming in. Diego Garcia says, "How much is a risk for Roki Sasaki?"
Oh,
I think it's a big risk. I do. Don't get me wrong. That I'm going to avoid the Dodgers pitching staff as much as humanly possible this year,
Wow.
unless the value is too high. And the reason is they are like 9 starters deep with quality starters. And so I wouldn't be surprised them just saying, oh, we're going to rest him for a couple starts and sit him out. Like you're expected to draft Roki Sasaki in a dynasty league. If it's not a startup, he's probably the number 1 pick in the dynasty draft this year. If you're drafting somebody that high to be an ace, you want 30 to 35 starts. Like you need a horse. And I just don't think he's going to give you that. I just don't. I think the way their rotation is built, they're going to go 6 or 7 at times in their rotation. And if you get 25 starts from him and he averages 6 innings a start, great. You're going to get 150 innings. I don't think that's worth where you have to take him to get him.
Where do you have to take him to get him at this point?
I can look up his ADP if you'd like.
Look up his ADP.
I saw him pitch against the Reds on TV this week, and this guy has explosive stuff. I mean, he struck out 5 batters in 2 or 3 innings. I mean, this guy is the real deal. He's 23 years old, and this guy's a phenom. He's going to win Rookie of the Year if he gets enough starts. That's all I got to say about him.
And even if he doesn't, if you really think he's got that explosive stuff, the numbers he can put up,
his ADP is a 5th round pick.
Yeah,
so that's where if you're assessing risk, it's really about where you get him. If you're getting him in the 5th round, it's too much risk.
I'm in LA, so
by the way, the past 2 seasons in Japan, only 33 starts because of injuries.
I knew that.
So there's I think significant risk built in.
And if you look at Japanese pitchers who've come over, Matsuzaka had to have elbow surgery his first year in the league. I know Shohei has had to have Tommy John surgery. I know who's the dude in San Diego?
You also got
Ohtani
Yamamoto.
did also.
You also got Yamamoto that missed a big piece of the season.
Yamamoto did.
And Ohtani.
Yeah. Well,
and
that's
Ohtani's not pitching until May. I mean, that's when
right. And so I think the upside, you're right, Ross, his stuff is amazing, is electric.
Well, you're right. I think
I don't think the upside is worth his ADP there. You have to, I mean, in dynasty leagues, you probably have to take him in the 1st round.
And they have a 6-man rotation. They have Blake Snell.
They have a 9-man rotation when you count Dustin May and Clayton Kershaw and
Tony Gosselin. They have Joe Dirt. Remember, nickname Joe Dirt. I mean, they have a 2-time Cy Young winner on their team that no one even talks about anymore because the Japanese guys get all the press. I mean,
so
and they have this guy named Clayton Kershaw. Am I saying it right, Casey?
He's won a couple Cy Youngs.
He's okay too. I mean, their pitching staff is sick. I mean,
it's
ridiculous. And their whole team. They got Tanner Scott. They got Phillips. They got Gratterall. They have an unlimited amount of relievers too. It's unbelievable.
I don't know what their payroll is, but it's absurd.
The payroll is like Dr. Dan's salary. That's what the payroll.
I mean, yeah, you have Blake Snell, you have
Ross imagines
Sasaki, you have Ohtani, you have Bobby Miller, you have Gosselin, you have May, you have. I mean, it's Glass now. We're not even talking about Tyler Glasnow.
You got Glass
like
now.
That's 7 or 8 guys I just named right there.
How is it? Dr. Dan Ratner waiting in the wings to come in also. I mean,
well, if Dr. Dan Ratner was working with their pitching staff, they wouldn't worry so much about it.
Exactly.
There you go. All right, let's get back to shortstop, guys. Who are we missing in our top 10 discussions? Anybody we left out? Casey? Anybody?
Go ahead. You want to mention your Yankee?
I mean, you got to put Mookie Betts in the top 10. We didn't talk about him, but
I have him as a second baseman. But if he is,
he's in the top 10.
He's starting shortstop this year for the Dodgers. Yes.
So. But if he
I'd have him 5th.
You put him there
if I was putting him in shortstop.
I agree with you.
I don't think he's in the top 3 or 4. No. I mean, I love this kid Xavier Edwards. He's just outside of my top 10.
Where are the stats? He has one stat category.
But that stat category is so useful, and you can get him for
a 330 average.
I mean, this is like Bryce Terang, except he can hit.
Right.
So he's going to stay in there.
I think there's still, I haven't given up. Now, I'm a Yankee fan before I say this. I haven't given up on Anthony Volpe yet. I still think he's a 2020 guy who's in a good lineup, in a good ballpark, but it wasn't a great year last year. So,
yeah, I mean, I have Volpe and I have Volpe as a sleeper. I have Edwards as a value. And Ross, by the way, I'm not planning on starting him all season. I want to start him there for like 40% of my games to get me my stolen bases.
And by the way, Zachary Neto in Anaheim,
I have him 10.
Hit 250 with 23 home runs and 30 stolen bases last year. Like those are good numbers.
I like he was on my value pick, Neto. I love him. I think he makes my top 10 also. No one talks about him because he plays in a small market. I'm calling it small, Casey, in Anaheim.
You can call it, well, compared to Ross the Boss, everything's small.
I mean, the Angels are probably the worst pitching staff. If your starting pitcher they renamed is what's that Japanese guy's name that they got from to pitch for Toronto? Kikuchi. If your starter is Kikuchi opening day and they named it in February, you have a bad pitching staff.
Yeah, that feels like the 1983 Indians.
Yeah,
we would have players like that.
But I think Nato's a good value pick. I agree. I think and the guy can run too. He steals bases.
Yeah. I mean, 23 homers and 30 stolen bases, and you can get him for a value just because he's.
You can get him for a nickel. Yeah,
it's one of the things I love it about fantasy baseball is that you pay attention to markets like the Pirates, where O'Neal Cruz is, and the Angels with Zach Neto. I mean, these are exciting guys. They're great players to get. All right, so let's just open up sleepers, values, and busts all together. Just name one or two of any of those categories because we're going to wrap up shortly. But anybody we didn't
I think we'll all agree on busts. The number one is Willie Adames. Raise your hand.
We all agree.
Willie Adames, number one. Okay.
I'm sorry, Willie. Willie. You had a great season last year.
We all agree he's going to be a bust. Not he's going to have a bad year. It's just the value you're paying for him is not worth it. You should get somebody else at that value. That's what we're saying.
Yep.
I think I have as a sleeper or a value pick is Carlos Correa.
I have him as a value pick. Yeah.
I mean, even in his injury shortened season, he still batted .310 with 14 home runs. I mean, he's on a 30. If he plays another 40 games last year, he only played 86. But if he plays like 140 games, let's say he was on a 90 RBI, 90 run scored 30 homer pace while hitting .310.
Yeah, I mean, he to me, he reminds me a little of Corey Seager at this point.
Right.
I'd rather have Corey Seager, but it's not that far apart. So I think Carlos Correa is a great value pick.
Casey, before we leave, because we're getting close on time here, I want you to do your young studs that we keep an eye on, not to draft, just keep an eye on, or if you have a really dark.
Well, I already mentioned in second base, I mentioned Christian Campbell. Yeah. The other second baseman I'd mention is a Cleveland Guardian, and Travis Bazana or Banaza. Bazana. He was their top pick last year. He was an incredible hitter in amateur, and he hasn't stopped. And I could see him being up pretty early in the season.
Well, I wanted to say that because a lot of those prospects, it's about where the opening is.
Yeah,
and he's got one.
He's got a good spot in at shortstop position. There's two big names. And that's Jordan Lawler, who was a top prospect last year for the Diamondbacks, but didn't make it up. He's 22. There's a little bit of kind of people are forgetting about him because he didn't get up, but steals bases, decent power, great eye and bat discipline, plate discipline. So there's no risk there. And then Marcelo Meyer of the Red Sox, this guy was a number one pick like 3 years ago, I believe 4 years ago, had some injuries in 23 and 24, but in 300 at bats last year, batted .307, 8 home runs, 13 RBIs, an .850 OPS, only a 2-to-1 strike to walk ratio, decent numbers. He's more of a hit over power kind of guy, more of the Bo Bichette kind of comp than Ellie De La Cruz or some of these studs, Bobby Witt, but no reason he can't have 20 to 25 home runs and 30 stolen bases, and he's going to get on base at a 385 clip, which can lead to a good batting average. So he's somebody I really like also that most people have already known about.
All right, great picks, guys. Next week, we're going to do outfield. Then we're going to move to pitchers. We're going to try to get everybody in before your drafts. Drafts are coming up soon, obviously, so we'll pack it in. Tune in next week for outfielders. Ross and Casey, thank you for joining us here.